I think Debra was completely unreasonable in the Christmas picture. I love her, but she has a habit of making some pretty unfair decisions, but it's a brilliant episode. This is the 11th episode of the 4th season of Everybody Loves Raymond. It's directed by Mackenzie, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it starts off with Debra and Robert discussing Christmas, and then Ray comes over. He's just been trying to find out what Marie would want for Christmas, and this year she actually told him straight what she wanted, and I love that so much because it's so annoying when you ask somebody what they want and they say, oh, I don't need anything, and then they ask you what you want. Well, no, I'm not going to say anything if you don't. So Marie did say that she actually wanted a family portrait, which I think is a really lovely gift idea. And a little while later, they come over with cookies, and Ray confirms that he's going to get them the family portrait. And then we have a bit of an issue, because Debra wants to spend Christmas Eve with her parents and then drive back early in the morning to spend Christmas Day with Marie and Frank. And honestly, I think that's reasonable. I don't think that's not the thing that I thought Debra had done wrong. I think that that's a perfectly reasonable request. And Marie obviously isn't very happy. And then we spend the rest of the episode at the photography place at the studio to get the photo done. And it does take up a bulk of the episode, but it's done so well. It never felt stale, even though it's quite a long scene. The photographer was actually a crime scene photographer before he did portraits, and we do have some fun discussion between him and Robert, which I rather enjoyed, and we have a couple of great lines from Marie and Frank. They're in a little bit later than they were going to be, because Frank wasn't willing to pay for parking nearby, and Marie explains this by saying, meters, money, your father, to which Frank replies, mouth, noise, your mother, which I rather liked a lot. And we also find out that Amy's not allowed to be in the picture because it's a Barone family picture and she's not yet a Barone, which I think is fair enough. I feel like Marie thinks of her as family in a way, but until they're married, they could very easily break up and that would be the end of it. So I can understand why Amy's not allowed in the picture, but also if Robert thinks it's a serious relationship, which it might be, then I can see why he's a bit hurt as well. So I can see both sides. And then, I'm so glad my memory is terrible. I've seen this episode before multiple times, but I couldn't remember the thing that made me gasp, the thing that happens next, because everybody's getting ready to take the photos, and in walk Debra's parents, and I genuinely gasped. That is unreasonable. That is completely unacceptable. Debra only did this because Ray was saying that they couldn't spend Christmas Eve at her parents', which, again, I think that's unreasonable. I think requesting to stay at her parents' is very reasonable for Christmas Eve. But to invite her parents to the family portrait isn't acceptable, because this is Marie's present. It's not like Debra and Ray wanted a family portrait. That would make sense. If they'd wanted it, absolutely bring in both sets of parents. But this is Marie's present, and that's completely uncalled for. Not only is it Marie's present, but I imagine it's a pretty expensive present, or at least moderately expensive, and you can't return it and get a better one without Debra's parents. So Debra was completely unreasonable there because it's not her present. It's not her photo to ruin. And Ray tries to convince Debra to take the photo without her parents, while Marie is just sitting sad and silent on a chair. She's had enough. She's trying to guilt Ray, obviously, into making it go her way. But honestly, I don't blame her. It's her present. And honestly, what Ray should have done, because Debra was saying, I'm not taking the picture without my parents, fine. They should have just taken it without Debra. I don't think Marie would have minded. If it was a choice between a photo with Debra and her parents, or a photo without Debra to exclude her parents, I think Marie would have taken that. I don't think Marie would have had an issue with a photo of just Frank, Marie, Robert, Ray, and the children. So Ray should have absolutely just done that, because it's not Debra's present. It's not her photo to dictate. Granted, Christmas Eve is not Ray's to dictate, and There's nothing really stopping Debra, though, from going to her parents for Christmas Eve. Just because Ray would rather not rock the boat and upset Marie, nothing's stopping Debra from going. So, and taking the children. And honestly, if she did that, Ray would go with her. So, Debra's unreasonable, unfair, and honestly just a little bit of a brat in this episode. It's absolutely unfair, and her actions are unforgivable. Maybe that's a little bit extreme. But the point there is that she's basically ruining somebody's Christmas present just because she's not getting her own way, even though I think her own way is reasonable and she can go to her parents. Nothing's stopping her taking the children. And Ray's had enough. He just wheels Marie in front of the camera and everybody gathers around and he loses it. Debra's mother asks if she has time to change into a different coloured pashmina, and Ray just starts shouting and yelling, and rightly so. Because a lot of people were behaving unreasonably. Not quite as unreasonable as Debra, but people were whinging, and Robert decided he wasn't going to change out of his uniform because Amy wasn't allowed to be in the picture, but Debra's parents were, which again, I think that's fair as well, because they're not Barones either. So Ray just had enough and he lost it, and it was a great performance and a brilliant outburst, and the photographer takes the photos. The children are brought in and the photographer takes the photos and everybody looks miserable. And then Robert did something great. He made fun of Ray and made fun of Ray's outburst, and everybody started laughing and smiling, and it was an absolute joy. I love how Robert managed to just lift everybody's spirits, and it was just really lovely to see. And I suppose they got a family portrait with the parents in. Again, if it was a portrait for Debra and Ray, 100% both sets of parents should be in there. But it's just a bit strange. Like, I can't imagine, for example, my grandmother wanted a family portrait. I wouldn't expect that to include, like, my maternal grandmother. I wouldn't expect that to include my paternal grandparents, neither of whom are alive, so it would be a bit strange. But the point there is that I just don't think that would work. They don't have that kind of relationship, so there's no reason for them to be in that portrait. And Debra was just, not for the first time, really, really unreasonable and ridiculous. If she wants to go to her parents for Christmas Eve, she can go, and Ray will follow her. There's no way Ray would stay alone on Christmas Eve, because he knows she would complain about it. So Debra could get her own way without being a brat. Not a good look for Debra at all. But, to be fair, seeing them all gathered there together at the end, it did look good. It did look well staged. I rather enjoyed those final few seconds. But it's a really good episode. Definitely very funny. Personal highlights would have to be Meter's money your father, mouth noise your mother, and Ray's outburst, and just the final few seconds getting the photos taken. It's a great episode. Not a good look for Debra, but the episode itself is I've just realised the photo on IMDb for this is one of the pictures, the family photos, and just especially Marie's facial expression. It's very funny, very, very entertaining. Really, really solid episode. The Christmas Picture is a pretty brilliant episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.